But here's what I'm going to do. The first 300 people who do that, and it's something we teach all of my students, in that if you want to be a successful property investor, but this is one of the reasons why over the last few years we've seen so many landlords decide to sell their properties and cash in their profit. So actually, rather than waiting for the right time to invest, I believe if you know what you're doing and if you follow my 5 golden rules of property investing from Property Magic, then actually it's always a good time to invest. And whilst there is some element of truth in that, I would suggest I wouldn't put too much weight on it. And in fact, I certainly wouldn't base your investing decisions on. Hello and welcome to the 300th edition of the Property Magic podcast. I can't quite believe this is episode number 300. It's been about 5.5 years I've been doing this podcast. And first of all, I want to thank you. Thank you very much for listening. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed doing it. And also we've changed the format a little bit. I now regularly have guests I interview about their success or their expertise. And I do hope it's helping you become a more successful investor. When I first started the podcast, I had no idea how many people would constantly come up to me and say how much they get value from it, and they've done deals by listening, so thank you. So what I'm going to do in this episode, I'm going to look at the last 5.5 years, what's changed in the property market, and I'm also going to pull out some really valuable lessons from the last 5.5 years, which I think are going to make you a far more successful investor. And also, I have a very special announcement I'm going to do at the end of this, where 300 of my listeners, I'm going to reward you for being a listener and also for taking action as well. So listen out very carefully. I think you're going to be blown away by what I've decided to offer to my subscribers and listeners. So I first started the Property Magic podcast at the back end of 2019. And obviously that was before COVID. And it was a very different property market then. It was a very different society then. I think COVID, which obviously hit us in March and April 2020, has had a profound effect on society and also as property investors. I'm going to talk about some of the changes. So at the end of 2019, you might remember property prices were quite high, and I was feeling that we were probably due for a bit of a market correction. I thought property prices might well come down. And when obviously COVID hit, there were reports in the press in May 2020, people like the Bank of England were saying, we don't know what's going to happen. Property prices might crash by as much as 16%. And I was thinking, yeah, actually, I wouldn't be surprised. Prices are quite high now. We're due a correction, and that might well be the case. But this is the first lesson I want to give you, which is a lot of people put a lot of weight and credence to property cycles. They say every 17 years a property cycle. And whilst there is some element of truth in that, I would suggest I wouldn't put too much weight on it. And in fact, I certainly wouldn't base your investing decisions on where are we in the property cycle. Just recognize that property prices go up and they also come down. But in the UK, the long-term trend is up. Why is that the case? Well, we live on this island with a limited amount of accommodation and an increasing population. So generally, over time, property prices and rents also go up. Now, there is obviously an affordability question. Right now, rents are pretty high and affordability is an issue, but as we have inflation and as wages go up and general prices go up, rents also will go up in line with that. And what happened in 2020 was the government at the time, the Conservative government, stepped in. And I think, to be fair, I'm very unhappy with some of the things that Conservative governments have done over the last 12 years or so, but actually the way they handled COVID in completely unprecedented times, those are the words people use, was probably pretty good. And I think any other party probably would have done a much worse job than the Conservatives did. What they did, recognising that retail and property are two of the fundamental markets that really fuel the UK economy, with retail suddenly being decimated because of COVID, they recognised they could not afford for that to happen to real estate, to property. So one of the things they did, they said, well, construction can continue. Whereas everyone else is locked down, you can still work on construction sites, although there was social distancing. And then also they did some very important measures. They introduced the stamp duty holiday, which meant that people could buy properties without paying the stamp duty, and that was an absolute blessing that got a lot of first-time buyers into the market, made it better for property investors up to certain limits, and they kept those limits, those holidays, for a number of years. They've obviously brought them back to the original levels now, but that definitely stimulated the property market. And you had lots of people who were living in apartments who were locked down, they realized they didn't want to live in an apartment, and so there was a massive boom in houses with gardens. The other thing that the government did, they introduced bounce back loans and CBIL loans. This meant businesses were able to borrow money, and a lot of that money worked its way into the property market. It wasn't intended to do that, but that's absolutely what happened, and that was another reason the property market boomed. So that was an unexpected boom. People thought prices would crash, but because of the intervention from the government, and my point being, despite what happens in the cycles, intervention can happen, or something like COVID can happen, that changes the game. So actually, rather than waiting for the right time to invest, I believe if you know what you're doing, and if you follow my 5 golden rules of property investing from Property Magic, then actually it's always a good time to invest. To recap very quickly, I'm sure you know this off by heart now. I hope you do as a listener to the Property Magic podcast. But the 5 golden rules, rule number 1 is we always work with motivated sellers. These are people who have a problem, they need speed and certainty, which means they might be more flexible on the price or the terms of the sale. Golden rule number 2, we only ever buy property in an area with strong rental demand. And right now, we have very good rental demand, all over the country, which is great. Rule number 3, and this is critically important, you must only buy properties that give you positive cash flow. What that means is when you take the rent, minus the mortgage, the insurance, the management fees, the maintenance, etc., there must be some profit left over every single month. In my mind, if there's not a monthly profit, that is not a good investment property. We need to get a return on our investment as well as the long-term capital growth. That leads to point number 4. We are buying and holding for the long term. Yes, we can make money short term by buying and flipping property that can make good chunks of cash. The problem is you need to keep doing that in order to make money. I believe the way to true long-term generational wealth is to buy and hold property. And if you're following the rules and you follow number 2 and 3, you know you can rent it out and it makes positive cash flow. Why wouldn't you hold it for the long term? And then golden rule number 5 is you must have a cash buffer. Some money put aside to cover unexpected occurrences, things that are not covered by insurance. So one of the things that happened during the COVID period, the government realized that many people were facing financial difficulty. And they said, look, if you can't afford to pay your rent, it's okay for you to have a rent holiday. Now that was pretty disastrous news for property investors, but at the same time, the government said, we know that there might be tenants struggling to pay their rent, and we know there might be landlords need that rent to pay the mortgages. So actually, as a landlord, if you need to have a mortgage holiday, then that is okay. Now, many landlords went, oh my God, panic, I can't afford my mortgage. I'm going to get this mortgage payment holiday. Now, if they followed my golden rules and had a cash buffer, they wouldn't need to do that. But the knee-jerk reaction, many people spoke to the mortgage company and said, I can't afford, can I go on a holiday? And we said in our community, actually, we don't think that's a good idea. In fact, I probably said it on one of these podcasts. I said, look, I don't think taking mortgage holidays is a good idea. If you need to do it, of course, do it. But if you don't need to do it, don't do it. Because imagine you've called your mortgage company and said, hello, I can't afford to pay my mortgage. Can I have a holiday? They're going to make a note of that. And we said to our community, look, guys, this might cause problems in the future when you want to remortgage or buy new properties. If you go to a mortgage company saying, yeah, I'd like to buy a new one or remortgage, they say, hang on a minute, you had problem paying your mortgage. Do we really want to lend you? And exactly as I predicted, there were thousands of people who'd taken these mortgage holidays who then had problems refinancing and getting further mortgages. So this is why it's so important to be plugged into a community. Don't try and be a solo investor doing this on your own. That's a very, very lonely journey. That's why I created the Property Investors Network, the very first networking for investors in the UK back in 2003, because I'd spent 8 years building my property portfolio and it was really lonely. And all my friends were still working. My family had some property, but their own property, but not really rentals. No one really understood what I was doing. And I was craving an environment I could go to. I could meet other like-minded people who would support me and champion what I was trying to do rather than be slightly negative. What do you mean you want to replace your income in a short amount of time? So it's very important for you to plug into a support mechanism. And obviously PIN is a great way of doing that. Our mastermind program is that on steroids. But there's support if you need it. Don't think you have to do this on your own. And those people who are plugged into our community who heard that message, luckily didn't take out those mortgage payment holidays, and they thus didn't have consequences later on. But again, it's just people who are listening to what we say, who are following the advice. If you had that cash buffer, it wasn't going to be a problem. So what also happened? What was another effect over the last 5.5 years of COVID and things happening? The next one, obviously, is interest rates. Now, prior to COVID, when I was recording the first few episodes of the Property Magic podcast back in 2019, we were in the situation where we had had very, very low interest rates for, I think, 8-10 years. The Bank of England base rate was 0.5%, which meant the effective pay rate for many landlords was maybe 2 or 3% on our mortgages. And most landlords got very used to very, very good cash flow coming in from our rental properties because interest rates were so low. Now, with all the money that was spent, all the money that was printed by the governments, this was obviously going to lead to inflation. And we saw double-digit inflation after COVID. And the Bank of England, not surprisingly, used interest rates as a macroeconomic tool to try and control inflation. Generally, when inflation goes up, the Bank of England raised the base rate of interest to slow the economy down to bring inflation down. That's exactly what they did, and we saw interest rates from February 22 start to go up. Then we had the disastrous Liz Truss budget, and we saw the really bad reaction to that, and rates shot up massively. So the Bank of England base rate going up to 5.25%, which is as high as it was prior to the credit crunch in 2007, what that meant was many landlords had mortgages that were Bank of England base rate plus 2 or 3% sometimes. So landlords were on mortgages that were anything to 7, 8, 9, even 10%. Suddenly landlords were actually losing money on some of their properties because the rents had not kept up as much. Now, rents have obviously gone up massively in the last couple of years, but this is one of the reasons why over the last few years, we've seen so many landlords decide to sell their properties and cash in their profit because they've had pretty good capital growth over the last 15, 20 years. Now, that is an important trend. Actually, that trend started in 2015 when the then Conservative government first announced they were going to bring Section 24 in, which is obviously the change to the way that we are taxed as property investors. If you own property in your own name, and you have mortgages and you're a high rate taxpayer, it means you pay a lot more tax. So that's why generally now most people buy in a property company because it's not affected by Section 24. But they announced that, and from that period, ever since then, we've seen more landlords exiting the market and retiring than we have more new landlords coming in. There's always going to be some people leaving and some people entering the market, but there's been a significant trend of more people leaving than there have been coming into the market. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, if you're in the market and you're staying in the market or coming in the market, that's good because less landlords, less supply, that means rents are going to go up. And also with all these landlords selling up, we can actually buy a property the landlord owns in their own name. We can buy it in a company structure and we can make more money for two reasons. First of all, we're not affected by Section 24. And that very often existing landlords have not kept the rents as high as they could. We can put new rents in, raise the rents, improve the property and make a lot more money than an existing landlord. So is property investing dead? Well, no, it's not as good as it used to be maybe 20 years ago, but if you're coming in now, it's still a really good time to get into property as long as you know what you're doing. So really high interest rates, but they are starting to come down. And I think right now, many property investors are waiting to see what happens with rates. I think they're expecting rates to come down further. They're waiting to buy because they think they're going to get lower mortgages. Now, what that means is there's not much competition right now. Now is a great time to be going out there. We're in this buyer's market. That means there are more sellers than there are buyers, which is a really good situation to be in if you're buying. Not such a good situation if you're looking to sell. I actually sold some of my properties that I bought over the last 30 years that weren't so good during COVID when property prices were booming. I got rid of some of the ones that are not so good, and I'm actively buying better properties right now because there are more opportunities available. This is what I believe the next 6 months, the rest of 2025 is a great time to be buying before everybody else comes back into the market, which might happen by the end of the year or maybe in 2026 when I think generally we'll see property prices to go up. So in terms of timing, now is a great time to get in and make the most of the current property market. So one of the other observations that I've got over this 5.5 years, this 300 episodes of Property Magic, is that Property Magic has raised awareness of what I do to many people who I just don't know. And it's something we teach all of my students, in that if you want to be a successful property investor, you really need to grow your network, whether that's going onto your social media, whether that's posting, telling people what you're doing, and you're not bragging, you're just sharing your journey. You might be showing the pictures of the before and after the refurb, or you might have the cheesy picture with a bunch of keys outside the property. And that's good because it's letting your contacts know that you are in property, because otherwise they may not know, because they might think you're a teacher or an engineer or a doctor or an accountant, whatever you do as your profession. That's how people see you. That's the image of you. But they need to know that you are also a property investor. And by sharing regularly on your social media and having that consistency of doing it, you're going to raise your awareness and attract people to you who might have properties they want to sell. There might be people who've got money they want to invest. But you need to do that. You've got to raise your awareness. And you've got to keep going. And I guess, I never thought I'd get to 300. I didn't know what the Property Magic podcast would do for me, but there are definitely people who I know who've come and brought deals to me, who have invested with me, who have done training with me, just because I've done the podcast, and that's how they've heard about me. So a big lesson from this is no matter where you are in your property journey, you should be raising your profile and attracting people to you. After all, no one's going to work with you if they don't know you in the first place. And linked to that is consistency. One of the things I notice in people who are not successful in property is they get excited by property, they go and dabble, they try a few things, but they just try them once. And if they don't get results straight away, they give up. And that's a real shame, because actually you're giving up on one of the things that could be the best thing you do in terms of wealth creation and generation, not just for you, but for your family, your loved ones, and future generations. And yes, investing in property takes a bit of time and effort. It's not easy. But when you know what to do, it's very straightforward. So a big lesson from this particular 300 episode edition is you've got to keep going. You've got to be persistent. You've got to be consistent. And sometimes you don't want to do things, but it's the things you do today that you don't want to do will give you the choice and freedom in the future when most people won't have that choice and freedom. But the commitment today and making the short-term sacrifices, or rather the smart decisions today, will hold you in good stead for the rest of your life. Now, I did say I had a very special offer I wanted to make for the 300th edition. And we have an annual event called Property Magic Live. If you listen to this, you might well have come before. Many of our students come back to it again and again because it's a 3-day opportunity to connect with me, to hopefully be inspired and get the latest learnings, but also to meet loads of people. We have 200 plus people live in the room in Birmingham, where we're doing it this year. We sometimes alternate to London and Birmingham. And we have hundreds of people who are paying to join us live online from all around the UK and even overseas. And the tickets for Property Magic, a virtual ticket is £497, a physical in-the-room ticket is £999, and a VIP Platinum ticket is £1,497. And as usual with our 3-day events, it comes with a 100% money back guarantee. Up to halfway through, if you're not absolutely delighted, think this is an amazing event, I've connected with loads of people, whether you're in the room or if you're virtual, we put you to breakout rooms to meet people you would never normally meet. You never know where those connections are going to go. But if you can't see how you're getting at least 10 times the value from this training, just let my team know and we'll give you all of our money back. And I can tell you from my heart of hearts, We really do not have people wanting their money back, generally from our events, but particularly from this event, because it's such an inspirational event. It's going to help you move forward, give you the tools you need to become a more successful investor. That's why so many of our mastermind graduates come back, even though the content does change, it's updated every year, but it's fundamentally a lot of stuff they already know, particularly on our mastermind. However, they come back again because they want to be re-energized, get re-motivated, and connect with more people. So it's an incredible event. Tickets are on sale right now. But I'm going to do something I've never ever done before just to celebrate this 300th edition of the Property Magic podcast. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post on my social media. There's going to be a link below this video or in the show notes if you listen to the audio version. It's going to be a link to one of my social media posts. And I'd love for you to come and give a genuine, honest comment about how you have benefited by listening to the Property Magic podcast. This might be the first episode you listen to. Hope you got some value from this. This might be the 300th episode you've listened to. But so other people who have not really experienced it can hear from my listeners' point of view how they've benefited. And it just give you a bit of a nudge, remind you of things you know. Maybe it's changed the way you think about things. Maybe it's actually helped you get a deal. Whatever it is, I'd love you to come and share your success, your results, and how you benefited from listening to the Property Magic podcast. So I really hope if you've got value, you're prepared to do that for me anyway. But here's what I'm going to do. The first 300 people who do that, come and comment, at least not just it's great, but at least 20 words, maybe a paragraph, whatever, about how you've benefited from Property Magic. My team will track that. And the first 300 people who click on the link and do that comment, I'm going to give you a virtual ticket to our 3-day Property Magic Live, which is 12th, 13th and 14th of September. So you can join us virtually from anywhere around the world or in the UK. If you want to upgrade to a physical in-the-room ticket, we'll sort out some sort of discount for you, but my team will be in touch about that. But you just join us virtually from the comfort of your own home for 3 incredible, inspirational days, build your network, and if you're one of the first 300 people, and you could see all the people commenting, when the first 300 people, my team will reach out to you and we will give you that complimentary access. So that's my gift to you for being a listener to the Property Magic podcast. And although 300 is quite a lot of tickets to give away, you know what? A lot of people listen to that, they'll think, oh, I'm not going to win. Guess what? I want to give it to the action takers. If you listen to my podcast, one of the things I'm trying to do is inspire you to take some personal responsibility for your financial future. Educate yourself, get out there, invest in property. One of the best things you can do. It does require taking action, so I want to reward the action takers. So the first 300 people, click on the link below, come and give a comment about how Property Magic, how listening to it's helped you. I will reward you by giving you a virtual ticket to the event. Now, if you already have a ticket to Property Magic, you could gift that to someone who you care about, who you know are going to benefit from attending that 3-day virtually. You can gift it to them. So it is a transferable prize. It's not no cash refund for it, but if you have someone you care about, if you've been to the event before, you know what an incredibly valuable event it is, I will allow you to gift that to someone else, but my team will liaise you and just sort out all the details. So put the dates in your diary, 12th, 13th and 14th of September. It's an annual event. We just do it once a year. It is truly inspirational. You're going to love the event. And the first 300 can come virtually as my guest just for listening and taking action and commenting on how much you're enjoying the podcast. So that's pretty much it. I do hope you've got some value from this episode. I do hope you listen in the future. I've got some amazing interviews coming up very, very soon by people just like you who've absolutely changed their life, and I know you're going to get massive inspiration. It's going to build your belief by listening to those, but also you'll pick up hints and tips about what they've done and how they've been so successful, so you can copy their success as well. So listen out for future episodes. If you're new to this, why not go back and start listening to the previous episodes? They're normally 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes long. They're bite-sized chunks we give every Tuesday. You can listen while you're at the gym, while you're walking, while you're standing in the queue at the supermarket waiting to pay for your shopping, or you might even sit listening, taking notes, which is obviously the best way to learn. But it's there for you completely free of charge. And I've had people who've listened to the podcast, just listen to that, and they've gone out and been really successful investors. They're go-getters, they're action takers. And if you've benefited, I'd love to hear. I will read with joy how you have been able to benefit from listening to Property Magic. So I will read every single comment myself, so I really look forward to hearing that. And obviously, if you haven't enjoyed listening to Property Magic, well, you're probably not still listening anyway, but if you don't like it, for God's sakes, don't tell anybody. Of course, I'm joking. You know, the fact you're still here, I'm sure you're listening and getting massive value from it. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd love you to like this video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified anytime we bring out a new video, because I do give a lot of valuable information away completely free of charge. And I hope this channel is educating you, inspiring you, and helping you become a more successful property investor. So look for the link below this video. If you listen to the audio, click on the link in the description, come and comment on the social media post about how it's benefited you listening to Property Magic, and I look forward to seeing you live online at Property Magic Live. If you're not one of the first 300 people, well, you know, you need to listen sooner and take action, but you can still come along to Property Magic and look out for webinars and things. We can do some promotions and offers, and I want to get as many people in Property Magic because I want to help as many people make the most of 2025. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest with skill.